Welcome down to my 9-foot homemade oak bar. Pour yourself a cold one. You are listening to Bucs in the Basement. My name's Chris, and Craig here is the biggest Pirates fan you'll ever meet. Let's talk Pirates baseball now. Welcome to Bucs in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no more lies. We'll never know.
The Pittsburgh Pirates season has not gone the way that many of us expected it to, especially how things have gone over the past couple of weeks, sitting at 58 and 66 as I record right now, bringing back Jason Mackey-Columnist from the Post-Gazette at JMackeyPG. Jason, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing great, man. Doing great. I'm out getting my car inspected, walking around, enjoying a beautiful morning, and as soon as you hit record, Craig, I walked past a leaf blower. So I did a 180 and went to another part, so now hopefully it's a little bit more quiet. You can't hear that in the background.
That's not a problem, man. We roll with the punches here at Bucs in the Basement. You had put out an article recently, and with Bryan Hayes, and almost immediately Bryan Hayes goes on the IL. I mean, there's no causation or correlation there. I think we kind of all saw this possibly coming. Hayes, as you wrote, I mean, 233 average. More importantly, the 573 OPS, the 60 weighted runs created plus, only 13 extra base hits in 396 plate appearances. The crazy thing to me was your jelly donut analogy within that, and how Bryan Hayes' back, I mean, could consistently be a problem here for the Pirates. So, I mean, this is kind of maybe a little bit of a loaded question, but where do we go from here?
It's not a loaded question. I just don't have a magic answer. I mean, here's where I'm at with Bryan and talking to him. And honestly, as I wrote in the piece, somebody who's experienced back problems as well. And I wasn't surprised to hear what he talked about. And I shared what I dealt with, and he was talking about what he dealt with. It's tough to say this is just what you do, this is how you have to handle it, whatever. It's more nebulous than that. As I wrote in there, it sounds to me like a herniated disc. Not trying to play doctor, but everything he described, that's the definition of a herniated disc. Surgery doesn't always fix that. I heard of a lot of people squawking on Twitter about, well, why doesn't he just get surgery? Because there's no guarantee that's what the answer is. But this, I know about Bryan Hayes. I mean, he's under contract, guaranteed money, this, that, and the other. They need to get it figured out. There are people who encounter this stuff who, find a way to get it to calm down, to remedy the situation. Maybe it becomes surgery. I don't know, to have it not be problematic. I mean, this is obviously not a new thing for Hayes, and it's also, again, as anybody with back problems can attest, debilitating and concerning. And so the Pirates need to me, punt on this season with Bryan. I mean, it's more important to figure out his long-term health. I don't know what sort of damage you would risk doing at this point if you just keep running him out there. It's obviously not working. He's not healthy. He's not producing. So to me, you sit him down. The IL might be the start of something. I don't know how that went down, Greg. I approached Key after Sunday's game to talk about that. The next day he's on the IL. I don't think that was the reason. I'm not inserting myself there, but it is just ironic. And I think probably the answer is just that he's been in a lot of pain, and it makes sense. He can't walk, can't play. You got to do something. So anyway, it's a long-winded way of saying it's a very uncertain future with Bryan.
Yeah, and that's where I kind of as I was, asking you to jump on here, we did not know he was going to go on the IL. I kept on thinking of, I don't even know what movie or show it was from. It's like, are you hurt or are you injured? Do you know what I mean?
Because it's from the program. It's from the program. It's Darnell Jefferson.
Okay, I knew it. It's one of those things that kind of jumps into your head, and you're like, where did that come from? But yeah, I was thinking about that the whole time because, I mean, obviously there are certain things that Brian Hayes would be doing that people would say, well, is he really injured? Because, I mean, obviously still trying to steal bases, making good plays at times, showing that, he still has the ability to do that. And then them saying, if the ball takes a bad bounce and he doesn't adjust to it, is that his back? But for that piece of it, I mean, the defense has been down just slightly a little bit. But, I mean, I looked at, average exit velo, something that he has always been able to do, is at 88.9 miles per hour this year, which is the lowest of his career. The biggest thing has always been launch angle. He's at 4.8. Last year he was at 13.2. He's not barreling up the ball. He's at 2.4. Last year he was at 7.4. And for me, I mean, this is something that we've all been looking at for a while, is that, I went back and I'm just like, okay, when did Key have his best months? Well, he had his best months when he's been able to rest. I mean, I know there's been adjustments made and different stuff, but it's just kind of weird that he has that breakout onto the scene after being at, the alternate site in Altoona where they weren't able to get much work in, and he explodes. He comes off the IL after being on there for a month, and he explodes. The beginning of this season, he has, not a great month, but, I think his OPS was sitting around like 711, which if you have that, which we've always talked about, you have that with, his great defense, then you'll take that. But, I mean, yeah, just what he's been doing, it's going to be a tough situation to navigate.
Yeah, and one thing that I found weird, inaccurate, frustrating, whatever, a lot of people were like yelling at the Pirates, saying this was the Pirates' fault. I mean, the Pirates do a lot wrong. That's not a defense of the Pirates, but I think there needs to be an understanding of the dynamic here. Bryan wants to play. He wants to contribute to his team. He doesn't want to, sit down. And I think a lot of him staying in the lineup and continuing to do this was him driven. It's not the Pirates. They're allowing him to do this. I mean, the two sides are communicating with one another. I mean, they don't know what's in his body, and I think he really wants to keep playing, or really wanted to keep playing, until it got to the point where it was just, this wasn't working. And so anyway, I kind of push back on that narrative that it's like all the Pirates' fault, and it's really nobody's fault, and I understand it's kind of why I structured the piece the way I did, why people get frustrated with the whole thing. I mean, he hasn't been good. He's not having a great time. He's in a lot of pain. The Pirates are in a tough spot with his contract. Fans get upset because they're saying, we're paying this guy, and this is what this guy can't be, and he's not living up to his end of the bargain. I get that too. I'm not defending any of it, but, he's trying to get out there. I just hope that long-term he gets healthy. We've seen this year for a variety of reasons, it's probably going to be a wash. And I'd put that conversation over there. If you care about the Pirates and want to see this work out long-term, Bryan Hayes can and should be a part of it. I think he can, 750 OPS, maybe up to 800. You're talking about Gold Glove defense. He can be a hugely important part of this thing, but he's got to get healthy first.
Speaking of blaming the Pirates for everything, you also wrote another piece not too long ago with everybody's favorite villain, especially on Facebook, I mean, for sure, Bob Nutting. The status quo is not good enough. And you put a decent amount of quotes in there of the things that, Bob Nutting, wants to do and expects from the team. I mean, we even look back to, when Ben Cherington was hired, and, Bob Nutting saying that, he was tired of, players, especially pitchers, going, other places and performing well. And we've seen the Pirates become, a little bit of a pitching factory at this point in time. I mean, some guys that have made it to the major leagues, but also guys at the top of the minor leagues. So, I mean, I'm wondering, like, a lot of this is that, I mean, there's been reports, and I don't know exactly, I don't have sources, so I'm not hearing this, from anybody, but trying to navigate the piece of the trade deadline where, I mean, there's some reports out there that, there was more money to be allocated by Ben Cherington. Other people saying that, trades needed to happen and to be put in place to be able to make other trades happen. I don't know with Bob Nutting. I know he has these expectations, but as far as like Cherington and then Shelton's performance, Travis Williams, I'm wondering like where the accountability lies, or if it's like somewhere in the middle in these kind of like muddied waters, because we're not all behind those closed doors. We don't know what's going on. So I guess my question would be, Jason, is that with Bob Nutting, he has this status quo, he has this expectation, and it kind of seems like there's ways that they're meeting it, but there's other ways that they're falling, well short of that.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I structured the piece the way I did, Craig. I mean, I started off at the beginning saying, I tried to remain as objective as possible covering him, and I think it's important somewhat. I mean, I have a different role, but, it still sort of matters or should matter what the guy says. Like, he is in charge. It's his team. And, what is he telling us about the expectations, how this team's going to be graded? And he's telling us that contention from beginning to end is what they expect, that he thinks he has a team that is good enough to take meaningful steps forward and compete throughout the season. Well, if they fumble this and wind up winning 76 games again, which I also outlined in there, that's not meeting expectations. They're not competing throughout the season. I mean, they had a nice stretch. They had a nice start. They did some things, but it's not competing throughout the season, and Bob would be foolish to think that. And stuff that he said along the way, those expectations aren't being met. Now, I do think that there's probably a difference looking at something critically versus looking at something the way people on X might look at it, where you're just going to react to everything in the moment. Nobody should react to everything in the moment with the Pirates right now, in my opinion. I mean, it's okay to, overarching be frustrated, but, we need to see where this lands. Let's say they get hot and they, show a 5-6 win improvement. I think Bob's going to be very happy. But if they regress, if they stay the same, he's not. And I think there is going to be accountability there. And I think it's going to, another thing, just to jump to another topic that's covered in there, is the offense. When we met with him after the Sheets unveiling, he talked about the offense isn't good enough. We know it's not good enough and all that stuff. And it's incumbent on Ben and his staff to have internal improvements and also go out and find external improvements. And we need to see what they have in Isaiah Kiner-Falefa and Bryan Cruz. I mean, obviously, De La Cruz has been disappointing. IKF is not. But at the end of this thing, can you sit here and say the offense has been better? I'd be stunned if we can. And so you take action, right? Does that mean Andy Haynes is coming back? How deeply do you look at that? The inability to develop hitters. It's a bunch of questions that Bob's going to have to answer. And at the same, it trickles down. I think there is accountability. Bob, Travis, Ben, Shelton, Oscar Marine, whatever. I mean, some of the stuff's gone well, some of it hasn't. But if this thing lands after 162 and we're sitting here with 76, 77 wins, the offense still stinks. Guys are getting better elsewhere. They're not getting better in Pittsburgh. They're still doing this cookie-cutter approach. I fully believe Bob would take action.
Yeah, and I definitely hope that he would. I mean, we've seen it happen with him before. I mean, everybody points back to, after the 2019 season where, Bob, pretty much cleaned house. So, I mean, he's not opposed to doing that. I'm just wondering, how long of a leash some of these people have, but to get more into the nitty gritty of, what happens this season and beyond with, positions. I look and people are saying, we're in quote unquote, year 5 of this rebuild, and there's still a hole at center field with no, legitimate answer. I mean, you have some possibilities. Rowdy Tellez is only on a 1-year deal, so after this year, you don't have an answer at first base. Right field has not become an answer this year, even though you've put a decent amount of guys out there. I still account second base in there as well a little bit. I mean, I know Isaiah Kiner-Falefa can play second base and could potentially become a full-time second baseman, but I mean, he also can play all over the field. So it's kind of that question of, do you put him in one position or do you use his flexibility as a strength within your team? So that's where it would be like, and also some people here, we'll get into this, is that they think that there's a question at shortstop, and that, lands with Oneil Cruz. A lot of people point to his errors as the be-all to end-all. I looked at the outs above average right now, and he's sitting at like -4, which isn't terrible, but I think that people here in Pittsburgh are used to, especially back in the day, near or at Gold Glove caliber defense at shortstop, and don't realize, I mean, the conversations that we've had before, Jason, is if you have a guy who is as offensive minded as Oneil Cruz is at shortstop, then that can be beneficial to a team. And Ben stated, Oneil Cruz shortstop for the foreseeable future. What's your thoughts on Oneil at short?
No, thank you. I don't mean it to sound that crude, but that's my opinion. I don't like it. I went into this year, Craig, wanting to see 162. Is he going to be good enough? And I'll still give him that. I'm not looking to make a move right now. He can have the balance of the season, and if he happens to improve, that would be great. I'd love to change my mind on him. But it would take changing my mind. And I see a player who makes too many errors to play shortstop in the major leagues. I understand what outs above average say. I also think there's a component of eye test, reliability, that sort of thing. You can look at team construction, too. Where I don't like it is you have a pitching staff that is going to put the ball on the ground some, and you need to build through pitching. That's their best strength. I'd lean into it. And for that, I don't want to have somebody that I have to worry about at shortstop defensively, and I think you do with them. I'd like to see what he looks like in the outfield. I think he can be a really good outfielder. The confidence just is not there in him making routine plays at shortstop. And I know that, the pushback will be, well, this is his first full major league season and he needs time. I mean, there's a trend of him not being good defensively at shortstop. And this is proving that trend to me. And, if I'm constructing my team, I'm going to prefer up the middle defense and try to, obviously keep his bat in the lineup, but I would look for somewhere else for him to play, especially with right field being what it is. I'm not sure I'd dump him in center at this point. I think it might be a little bit too much. But, yeah, I mean, you brought up some good earlier points about, I don't know who plays center field for this team next year. I mean, maybe it's a free agent acquisition. Maybe miraculously Jack Sawinski figures it out. I wouldn't hedge my bets there. But, yeah, year 5 of a rebuild, you would certainly like to have things a little bit more stable than they are now. That being said, I think that's sort of the negative way of looking at it. One other way of looking at it is they've got a pretty darn good rotation and pitching pipeline coming up where you're probably not going to have to spend on that stuff. You're going to have to spend on things to fill holes. They did it last offseason. They didn't do a great job of it. They're going to have to do it again this offseason. So if they go into free agency and say, okay, we're pretty good on the pitching front. We need to go buy a first baseman. We need to go buy a center fielder who can defend and hit a little bit, basically do what they tried to do with Michael Taylor. It didn't totally work out. I don't think that's the biggest problem to have, honestly.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. If you move Oneil off of short, then you might be able to solve a corner outfield position, but then you have to fill in at short, which, as we see, I mean, Ben Cherington has accumulated tons of middle infielders, which I have no problem with, because usually a guy who, plays shortstop, is, as everybody talks about, is like the most athletic person on the field, and you can move them to other positions. It just kind of seems like that most of those guys that are getting moved to other positions off of shortstop are landing at second base, as opposed to, a guy that goes from shortstop to center field. But I mean, with the outfield, I mean, you need a right fielder, you need a center fielder, and I mean the buzz across, X again. I mean, I hate to rely on that, but I think there are some good points that are made there. If you wade through some of the other stuff, is Bryan Reynolds kind of regression defensively in the outfield, in left field. I mean, he got moved off of center field because he had one of his worst defensive seasons. I looked back. It was negative 15 defensive runs saved in center field before he was, officially moved off of that. Now he's at negative 6 defensive runs saved, negative 12 outs above average in left field, which is bringing down his overall performance. I mean, he's having a fine, offensive season, obviously not the type of season that he had in, 2021 offensively, his best offensive season. But you have a guy that, I've seen the arm strength. I mean, that's something that gets pointed out on the broadcast fairly regularly. We've seen him get some outfield assists at getting guys at second base and different stuff. But overall, I mean, that's just, at this point in time, if you look at the Pirates outfield, like, I hate to say year 5 again, or this point in the rebuild, or when we should be trying to contend, but the Pirates don't have like a legitimate outfielder on the roster. And that's like no disrespect to Bryan Reynolds because his bat has been so good. But if you have his bat being good and, not playing great defense, then you need to have better people in place in right field and in center field. And if you don't do that, then it's almost like Bryan's defense becomes an issue as well.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. I think this could be remedied with a productive center fielder, and you're just asking less of Bryan Reynolds. That's what they tried to do with Michael Taylor, and the bat just didn't support a place for him in the lineup. And aside, I don't understand continuing to run Ji-Won Bae out there. I understand the speed, but that's not the defensive center fielder you need, in my opinion, and I don't think the bat holds up. I mean, it's a sub-500 OPS at this point, but that's a separate point. Honestly, Craig, I don't know what you do with Reynolds. I mean, other than keep playing him. I would probably give him a look at first base this offseason, just out of sheer curiosity, aligning a team need with what he hasn't really done in left field. But at the same time, there's no guarantee he's going to be any good. And then what's your outfield look like at that point? If you move Oneil out there, Reynolds is gone. Are you going to have Oneil Cruz, Bryan De La Cruz, and then somebody else? I mean, I have some doubts about that, but it's just kind of a difficult spot for them. I mean, they might just have to keep running Bryan Reynolds out there and hope for the best, which is fine. The bat supports it. I don't have a huge issue there. I am a little surprised that they didn't try to flip-flop a little bit more. Remember when he played right field for a little bit in spring? Almost trying to, protect him and put him in, shorter area outfield spots, right field at PNC and maybe some left fields that are easier to play on the road. I'm surprised they went away from that, but I do think this would be helped out a lot if there was a more consistently productive defensive-minded center fielder out there.
Yeah, and that is a great point, Jason, because I think a lot of people forget about that, is that, when they brought in, Michael A. Taylor, I think it was like the first game after that, we saw Bryan Reynolds in right field, and Shelton even spoke about, being more flexible with that. But yeah, I mean, he's just pretty much been plopped out in left field, like, this is where you're going to play. The next thing I had written down here is that there was an Athletic article recently. Ken Rosenthal, I think Stephen Nesbitt also contributed to it as well. And it's speaking about that pitching, and it's speaking about Paul Skenes. Paul Skenes right now is at approximately 125 innings. It looks like they've gone with the plan of giving him extra rest, which we definitely saw. They've spoken multiple times about the importance and their desire to get him through the full season, but then there's also that counter argument of the quote-unquote shutdown to try to save some service time and different stuff like that. But I was looking at this. I mean, he would pretty much only, if they went with the stretching out the time between starts and different things, and even if they didn't, you're looking at 8 starts at most, 6 starts on the low end. I'm trying to see. I don't see there's a way that he doesn't make it till the end of the year unless there's something I'm not really seeing. Do you agree with that? Or, what do you think is going to happen with Paul Skenes towards the end of this year?
Here's what I know about Paul Skenes. The desire has been for him to finish the season. And that means the Pirates are competing in games. That means that, they're at least flirting with a wild card spot. Paul is a big part of that. Paul wants that. Shelton wants that. Cherington wants that. All of it. That's not happening. It's probably not going to happen. I think everybody's probably realistic about that. I have not heard a single whisper concern about Paul Skenes' service time. It's basically assumed around there he's going to finish 1-2 Rookie of the Year voting. Maybe more, who knows, but that's probably going to net him a full year anyway. I think people are operating as if this is just a year of service time for Paul Skenes. They're not really looking to save or worry about it. It's more frustrating that they probably wasted a year of his time here. Which stinks, but it's a separate argument. I think the next discussion then becomes his health and what's best for him. And, I think he topped out at 130 some. Usually see about plus 20 year to year, young pitchers like that. I think they'll respect that. I think they'll probably let him go to, 150 to 160, let him keep pitching down the stretch. And there's probably a concern about the gate, too. If Paul gets in there and he's making starts at PNC, you're gonna get some crowds. But I don't think it's enough to jeopardize what they think about his arm health. I think what the discussion then becomes, if you're not competing for a spot, is just doing what's best for Paul. And so it wouldn't shock me, this is probably the short answer of it, if they shut him down with 2 or 3 weeks. And I don't think it's malicious. I don't think it's trying to manipulate service time. I mean, they might just, I hope Ethan Hullahan doesn't kill me on this. I think that, you can just keep him on the roster, keep him around. He continues to earn service time. I don't think they're out to take that away from him. I just think it's, if he's at 160 plus and there's 7 games out of the wild card with 10 to go, it doesn't make sense for him to make 2 more starts. And, I'm kind of snowballing just what we're, spitballing what we're talking about here. It's just, I don't think that matters a ton. I think what they're going to worry about is his arm health, and I think it's fairly collaborative with Paul, too. He understands.
Yeah, and I think I shouldn't say it's something as simple as an IL stint with arm fatigue. I mean, I don't think that's something that many people would question as far as, his arm health. Do you know what I mean? And it's not really even a fan.
Probably arm preservation or something like that. I don't think anybody would bat an eye. It's, again, I don't think they're out to take service time away from him. I don't think they're gonna send him down and look. They brought him up May 11th. That showed right there they don't care about his service time. He's a part of this thing, and they want him to be a part of this thing for as long as they possibly can.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a hard thing to navigate, and I think that probably no matter what happens, like I said, I think that people will be out there, trying to blame the Pirates for how they handle it. I think they did the best they could with this situation. Obviously, it's unfortunate that the team has kind of fallen out of contention here. Obviously, have been still competing in games. Looking at the number of 1-run losses, and people will say that I'm I'm carrying water for, the front office with that, but I mean, it's an obvious fact that you win a couple of those one-run games and you're only, 4 games out of the wild card, 3 games out of the wild card, as instead of being, almost 8 games out of the wild card. But Jason, this has been a great conversation as always. I always appreciate you giving me your time to come on here and to talk these questions, and maybe in some ways, talk some sense into me, because I am a fan and I don't always take that fan hat off. For you, those of you that don't, please go follow Jason Mackey, covering all of the teams now as a columnist, gets to go out to, training camp and everything. I hope you're enjoying that part of the job, Jason. You definitely seem to be. It's at JMackeyPG. Jason, thanks a lot again, man.
Of course, Greg. Thanks for having me, and anytime.
Absolutely. Hope the car inspection is not too expensive for you.
Me too, brother.
Hip, hip. Now I see the changes in this town. They change.